and you play so smooth. Makes me wanna groove. Patrice says groove.
Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Seniors Matter. I'm your host, Brenda Charles Edwards. We're live every Friday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Rainier Avenue Radio World, our South Seattle community station. You can also listen to us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch TV, and of course, the Rainier Avenue Radio App. We feature interviews with people that provide services or have valuable information for seniors, their family, and of course, the community. Do you need financial documents notarized? Are you in need of documents being read to you for clarity or completion? Call me, Brenda, at Black Orchid Notary, 206-683-2636. Tell me where, I'll meet you there. Well, this is the last day of the month of March, and we are celebrating Women's History Month. But as you know, every day of the year is Women's History Month. It's not just 1 month. We do things and have done things for years, every single day. Today, my guest is Chalon L. Ervin. She's a clinical psychologist based in the lovely Seattle, Washington. Welcome, Chalon. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
It is always a pleasure, my dear. You are one of my favorite people. And before I forget, because sometimes my memory does slip me, there's one other person I want to give a shout out to for celebration of women's history, and that's my mother. She's one of the original Rosie the Riveters, and I definitely have stood on her shoulders. She's taught me all the things that I need to know to prepare me for womanhood, and I love her dearly. And Mom, keep it going.
Keep it going.
Yes, she's very special.
Yes.
So I'm going to say, tell us a little bit about your background and what motivated you to enter the psychology field. But I also want to say that you have earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from Spelman College. And I'm guessing by attending Spelman College, you definitely stood on the shoulders of some great women. And once you tell us about your background, would you mind sharing with us who inspired you the most?
I absolutely would be delighted to.
Thank you.
So, as stated, my name is Chalon Ervin. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been in the field almost 10 years professionally. Well, I know time has been flying.
Yes.
I definitely enjoy the work I do. I'm trained as a generalist, but I specialize in trauma. So we see a lot of that these days. So I stay pretty busy. What inspired me to go into the field? When I entered Spelman, I started off as a pre-med student. I thought I wanted to go to med school. I took one psychology class, and that switched my whole trajectory, and I just kept going, and I kept going, and I kept going. And here I am. And specifically for my route to psychology, I will say at Spelman, of course, I had many professors who looked like me. Mm-hmm. And I had two professors, Dr. Chisholm, rest in peace, and Dr. Patterson, who inspired me to take this route specifically because I saw them do it and I knew I could do it. And it was just very empowering to see someone look like you, help mentor you to get where you are. And now I actually believe it can happen, because at times I did not.
I understand. I had a psych minor, and really that was good, because later in life in some of the professions that I've been in, I had to go back on it and bring up things that I'd learned. And I have to remind myself, I need to do that now with some things too.
Yes, it always comes in handy, whether you made your minor or you just want to learn about it. It definitely is how the world works. And the more you understand it, I think the better off you can be in this world.
Very true. Very true. So after completing your undergraduate degree, you worked as a real estate agent to assist in financing your graduate education. So how did that come about? And are you still one?
I'm not still currently one. Too much on my plate. Sometimes I miss the work. But what actually happened was, I took a gap year off to pursue my real estate license, but mainly to help care for my grandmother who had had a stroke. So I moved back from Georgia and came back to Seattle and was caring for my grandmother. But during the time I was doing that, I also pursued my real estate license while I applied for grad school, because grad school is quite expensive.
Yes.
I said, if I can get a few sales, I think I'll be okay to start.
I love it. That's great. That's great. If you're just tuning in, you're listening live to Seniors Matter with your host, Brenda Charles Edwards, on www.Rainier Avenue Radio World. We're here every Friday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Do you know what's the best gift we can give ourselves and our loved ones? Join me on Zoom for a group or individual session on Speaking of Dying End-of-Life Planning. Call me at 206-683-2636. Now back to my guest, Dr. Chalon Ervin. Oh, your dad's going to get me.
He's okay.
So as you were saying earlier, you were trained as a generalist. And what is a generalist? And then I also know that, because you said you deal with trauma and transition, but what is a generalist?
So a generalist means that I can treat the multitude of disorders. So I was trained to be able to treat from trauma to depression to anything that's in the diagnostic manual for disorders. So I am versed in that, but I have a specialty in trauma, but I can treat it all.
Wow. Well, and then are you still working at the King County Superior Court?
I am.
Wow.
Yes.
So folks, she's a clinical psychologist there too. I mean, she's an example of what we do, not what we can do, but what we do, because we multitask.
Yes, we wear many hats because we're needed in so many areas. So.
Absolutely. And so I know you also, and what's concierge services?
So that was pre-pandemic, but it's bringing itself back. This was for many of the people who have busy schedules, but also want to utilize therapeutic services, can't come into an office. So before the virtual world kind of took off, many insurance companies were requiring you still had to see face-to-face. So this was a way around having people come into the office. I could meet them somewhere in a confidential space, maybe their office, and still get the work done, because we have to be flexible in order to get what we need.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Very good. Okay. And I know you do a lot of public speaking and as well as consulting.
Yes. So that kind of like is my route. Like I have been doing less individual clients and more trainings, more public speakings. That's just where life is taking me, even though I do miss some of the individual clients and got to find a way to balance that. But
right.
I find that being able to do trainings and speaking to a larger audience can be helpful, because there are so many people on the fence about mental health services or who don't understand exactly what it entails to participate in therapy.
So how did you decide on the name Renewal of the Mind, LLC?
Well, actually, my spiritual background, I grew up in Mount Zion Baptist Church and also attended several other churches, including Reverend Edwards' wonderful church, where I learned a lot about scripture. And one of the scriptures that stood out was not being transformed by the world, but by the renewing of our minds, Romans. And I think that it ties into mental health and the role that I do. We have to sometimes, we can't change our circumstances, but we can change how we think and how we respond to them. And that is how I came up with the name.
I love it. I love it. That is so true. And I have to remind myself of that.
Oh my gosh, daily. It's a daily renewal process. Like yesterday's skills might not work today. So
Absolutely. So, and there was something else I know that you have a passion, and that's for the art of healing and self-actualization.
yes.
What is self-actualization?
Self-actualization is kind of an aspirational goal. It's about reaching your highest self. So it's not a destination, it's a continual process of being able to understand yourself, how you interact with the world, being able to understand yourself also in connection with the spirit, the physical, all pieces. So a lot of times when people come in initially for therapy, they will come in complaining about everybody else. And why that's just a common human nature. And that's how we have to renew our mind. But self-actualization is really looking at how we play into the patterns that come into our lives and recognizing the parts of ourselves that we can change, because it's very hard to change other people. Yeah, but we still try.
I love it. I love this. So now let's throw in a commercial for you. How can one reach you for consultation?
Okay. My website is probably the easiest way because it has all my contact info. And it is Dr. Chalon, DrChalon.com. And there you'll find my social media handles, my direct phone number for business, and other resources. So that is where I generally direct most people.
All right. So now, since we're talking about, never mind. So what are some healthy coping skills our listeners can employ?
I think very healthy, just to start, is the art of breathing. I know people say, well, I'm already breathing because I'm alive. So what do you mean? And that was my response when I was learning about it in school. Like, I'm breathing. What do you mean? But one thing our breaths do, aside from give us life, is they nourish all our organs, including our mind. And one thing, especially as we're in this era of the world where things are so fast paced, we don't recognize that our breathing goes fast paced as well. And when we do short breaths instead of diaphragmatic breaths, we actually create more anxiety in our body. So when we're in danger, you do a short breath because that's what's going to help you escape. But oftentimes we condition our bodies to breathe in a shallow manner, which then sends signals to our bodies that we are in danger. And that is why you see an increase in panic attacks with people, where you see people just feeling on edge. When you can practice your deep breaths, it won't change your external situation necessarily, but it'll change how you respond to it. And it will also give you a moment to think. Because when we do shallow breaths, a lot of the oxygen that we need from our diaphragm to go to our prefrontal cortex, where we make our decisions, is lacking. So then you are not thinking, you are reacting. And when you are reacting, you fall in the same patterns. So the art of breathing really does allow us to pause and allow us to really respond instead of react. And it helps all your organs.
So how many deep breaths do we need to take if we're in a situation that might be contentious or stressful for sure?
Well, everyone's breathing pattern is slightly different. So I don't say a full number, but what I do say is try to count to 10 and take as many deep breaths during that time period as you can, because everyone's pattern's a little different. And sometimes if I count, then people will actually hold their breath, and that's not what we want to do. So I say, we'll slowly count to 10 and then take as many breaths not as many, take as few breaths as you can in a way that's relaxing, not contentious.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Yes.
Woo, deep breath.
Deep breaths. But I did want to circle back to your second question that you asked me, because I only answered it in part. I answered professionally of women that inspired me, but I want to answer personally, Women's History Month. I come from a very large family on both sides, my mother's side and my father's side, and I had lots of female influence, lots of powerful, strong women. I will start with who is living. So my mother, of course, she's still living, Beverly Ervin. I think she's listening.
Oh, I'm sure she is.
Yes. She has inspired me and has walked through me with every step in my life. So I want to thank her for that. And she's modeled what it means to be a strong Christian woman, which I embody and I'm trying to embody. I can't quite fill her shoes, but every day I try to learn. And I'm appreciative of it.
You're filling your own shoes.
Thank you.
She gave you the footprints, and now you're following in them, but you're not going to aim to fill those shoes. You have your own shoes. And the child that comes behind you, which by the way, how's baby girl? She'll be filling her own shoes too, but you'll be setting the footprints for her.
That is such a great reminder, because even as a clinical psychologist, we learn from everybody, and sometimes we need to take that advice. And yes, that's where self-actualization comes back into play. Your route may not look like someone else's, but you can still be inspired by it.
Yep. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No, that's perfect. And baby girl, she's doing great. Hopefully she's taking a nap, but I'm not quite certain of that because she fights her sleep.
I wonder where she got that from.
I don't know. Yes, so my mother, I have wonderful aunts who've inspired me. And then who is no longer living, a few who are no longer living, but inspire me even posthumously, are my grandmothers, both maternal and paternal, Pazza and Christine, and also my Aunt Vicky. She was just a ray of sunshine for me, and the memories I have of her, I still hold, and I still try to make her proud.
I'm sure you're doing a very good job. She is smiling. So, how would someone know if they should seek therapy other
You
than
know,
somebody else suggesting it?
my answer is probably not a popular one. I say everybody needs it. So if you're living, therapy can be a helpful tool because it's a space where you can go and process many things. You can process your day, you can process your feelings, you can process your thoughts. A lot of people avoid therapy because they think they need to go, or that it signalizes they have a problem. Well, problems exist all around us, and it just helps to be able to have a space to cope. I know we often rely on friends and family, but they have a threshold. And sometimes when you rely on friends and family, they have ears and they have a mouth. And sometimes that mouth carries your information to places you don't want it to go. But therapists are bound by HIPAA, and what you share stays in that space unless you admit to self-harm or abuse.
Wow. And that's interesting that what you say about friends, because I know someone that is going through medical issues right now, and she's been talking to her friends, and which is understandable, but but it sounds like from what she's saying is that they are starting to feel maybe a little burdened by it, and because they're her friends, they don't they may not wanna accept the realization of what she's going through also, and
Yes.
so it does make it hard, but as I told her, I said, "They do love you, and maybe you need to find another source of expressing how you feel, or not realizing what you're feeling, because when you're going through something for the first time, it's hard to know what that experience is going to be."
I think that is the best advice you can give. And when you're dealing with people who are close to you, generally they're impacted by what you're going through directly. So then their feelings sometimes come up, or their stories sometimes come up when you're trying to process. But a therapeutic relationship is slightly different because hopefully your therapist isn't sharing about their feelings during your time, but they are listening. And also with therapy, we try not to give advice. We try to help you find your own tools
Mhm.
collectively, because sometimes advice doesn't work for everyone. Like, that may have worked for you, but that's not what works for me. And the most empowering thing for anyone is to be able to come up with solutions that work for their lives specifically.
Right, and so like you say, sometimes that's really hard. You have to do trial and error.
Yes.
So, what are common issues that impact seniors?
Isolation.
Mm.
Once again, one of my favorite topics, transitioning.
Ah,
There is a transition in all parts of our lives, but specifically when you are transitioning into your senior life, that may mean retirement. That may mean a lot of variations happening all at one time. That may also mean loss of loved ones around you, because as you age, things change.
mhm.
And a lot of grief comes with that. But when we think about grief, we only generally think about grief of loss of life, but not loss of parts of our lives that we may no longer be fulfilling, or that we may be retiring from. And that brings many feelings, but there's not always spaces to process it because it's not always acknowledged. So those are common issues that I see for seniors. And then also how changes in physical health and appearance can also impact the mental. That's not talked about. It's just like, well, this is a normal process. While it might be normal to the world, it's not normal to me. So
Right.
I need a
Right.
space to process that.
Mhm. I agree with you 100%. It's and then, and the word retirement is, I believe, different now than it was many, many years ago when, well, let's say when AARP first started.
Yes.
Retirement is not the same. And most of the people that are retired are maybe in their second retirement because you can't afford to be quote unquote retired on the first job you have because life has gotten more expensive.
Very
And
expensive.
you made all these preparations. When that first retirement comes, it's not enough. So now you have to find something else that is of interest to you, hopefully, and use that as your cushion, your backup.
Absolutely. These inflationary costs, like even within the last couple of years,
Mhm.
have exceeded what most people can afford, which then also is another transition if you plotted and planned out your retirement and now facing potentially having to go back to work or finding other means, that can be very stressful.
Absolutely. So, given all of that, what is your best advice that you would offer our listeners on leading a meaningful life?
I would say figure out for self what meaningful life means, not what other people told you it should be, even how Miss Brenda corrected me of trying to fill someone else's shoes. It's a great reminder of what is meaningful for you because we all have a unique purpose. We all have our own unique values and our own unique way of interacting with the world. So, meaningful, just like success, it means very different things for different people. And the only way to achieve it is to really recognize what it means individually for you, but also making sure that you try to lead as healthy as a life as possible because all things interact. That's food, exercise, and dealing with emotions. And a lot of times, especially I'll say it during Women's History Month, women have been trained to just keep going
Mhm.
and to carry the weight of the world. And there's an emotional and physical toll that comes with that. So recognizing that and taking meaningful pauses because rest is resistance and rest is not something that should be earned, it's given. So making sure that you rest so that you can live a meaningful life.
So, do you think it would help to make a list of things that, I don't know, give you joy or things that don't, and then look at that as, how does that fit as a meaningful part of my life? What
I
type of
think
meaning does it have to my life?
if you're a list person, definitely I recommend lists. It can be very helpful to look at it and see. I also ask people to do it real time. Some of your obligations, are they truly things you have to do? Or have you conditioned yourself to think you have to do it? Things shift. And I also tell people pay attention to your energy and the energy of other people when you enter spaces. Is it leaving you more fulfilled or is it leaving you depleted? If it's leaving you depleted, some things we can't change because they're obligations. What can you do to backfill? If you don't have anything to backfill, that's going to lead to many of the disorders we see. So thinking about the balance, we can't always have happiness, but we can try to achieve joy by finding the balance.
When you say backfilled, what is backfill?
Great question. So if I, let's say, go to a meeting and I feel depleted after it,
Mhm.
I'm going to need to leave that meeting and have something that brings me joy because you want to make sure that if you've been depleted, that you have something to fill you. And it can be something as minor as getting a snack to eat, watching a show, taking rest, talking to someone who uplifts you, but making sure that the depletion doesn't keep reoccurring because then you will have an empty tank.
Well, then that was gonna be my next sort of statement question. So what if the same meeting has the same results? What does that mean?
That's so funny you asked. I was listening to a sermon the other day, and it says sometimes we've outgrown spaces. Sometimes our calling may be higher than what we can provide in that space. It doesn't mean quit, but it does mean evaluate and see. Because if your efforts aren't going in a way that you think are meaningful, I'm sure there's so many other spaces where you can do some of the same things and get better results.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about examining and recognizing where you are in the present, even if in the past it worked.
I love that. I have 2 minutes left. Tell me what you do for relaxation.
Well, as a mom of a 10-month-old, whenever I can sleep, I do that these days. Sometimes it's just turning everything off and sitting in silence, because sometimes my thoughts can be very loud. So having space to process them, or sometimes it may be turning on soothing music. It just depends on the mood. And when I can, I love to travel.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. Oh, and I'm sorry, and I meant to say, congratulations on
Thank
all your
you.
newness that's happening right now. Of course, I've seen the baby. Baby,
Yes.
baby is a
Full
joy.
of life.
Joy. You know, that is joy right there. And of
Yes.
course your husband is too. But, you know, it when I saw you recently, that house was just filled with joy and laughter. And I wish I could have stayed longer because
Well,
it
we have
was
to bring you back.
but it was just wonderful to be in that atmosphere. And that's the type of atmosphere that I try to strive to have. Know that I can't have it every day, but like you say, finding that peace that will, when things aren't peaceful, that you can go to rejuvenate and refill
Yes.
yourself. And not only drinking that physical water, but drinking that spiritual water too.
Absolutely. It's so important.
So any last comments you'd like to give my audience? I know we have already said once where they can reach you. Are there any parting words?
Go inward. Listen to yourself, because I always tell people when they come in, I may be the expert at diagnoses and mental health, but you're the expert of your own life. And don't forget that.
Oh, I love that. What a way to end. I'd like to thank my wonderful audience, those listening, as well as those that are watching us. It's been great having your support over the years, and I hope that you have a great weekend. I also would like to special thank to Chalon. Thank you, my dear. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And my vocalist, Patrice Isley, that does the background music. Have a great weekend. Be safe and live your life like it's golden. Bye. I'll talk to you later.